The Democrat Party's love for women. Yes, I am being facetious. Insert sarcasm here, but this is the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Did you know that the Democrat Party loves women? Love women, protects women so much that they create women out of men and then send these men into competitions against real women, and then applaud when these fake women, known as men, actually win. Yes, that's Democrat love for you. And if you dare to call it out, if you dare to call out this lunacy that the Democrats are pushing called transgender agenda, if you dare to call it out as lunatic fringe, then you are the one who is intolerant. You are the one who is a hater of humanity. You are the one who is abusing the civil rights of citizens. Well, let me just say, any parent out there, any Democrat out there, any caretaker out there who is presently pushing a child, a minor age child, to undergo some sort of medical treatment to transition, and that's transition in air quotes because, of course, you can never fully transition. It's all fake. It's feigned. It's deception. But if anybody out there is currently pushing a minor age child to transition into the opposite sex, shame on you. You're acting in a very evil manner. And you are abusing that poor, victimized minor age child. You can't tell a little kid who's a boy that he can become a girl by taking some shots and undergoing some surgery and changing the style of dress. It just doesn't happen. And you can't tell a little girl that she can become a boy by doing the same sort of procedures. Look, it's clear. God created male and female. In his image, he created both. And that's all there is. There's male and there's female. The left has been busily attacking this basic truth for a very long time, but it seems like suddenly overnight they've been making quite a bit of headway here. They've been able to change the entire thought process of the coming generation into believing that sex is just a choice, like what shoes you're going to put on in the morning. And you know who really gets harmed here? The girls, the females, the girls who are suddenly forced in their public school settings to change in the locker rooms next to boys who, for that day, for whatever reason, say they're actually girls. The girls who are now forced, in some instances, to compete in sports against boys who, for whatever reason, suddenly that day decide that they want to be girls. And these are girls who are competitive by nature, perhaps looking to segue from their high school athletic accomplishments into college athletic accomplishments on the wings of athletic scholarships, seeing their opportunities at achieving that dream being stripped by boys who pretend they're girls. And what's worse here is that we're all supposed to go along with this deception. We're all supposed to smile and nod and use the pronouns that these lunatic fringe people say that they suddenly have become. We're all supposed to partake in this societal lie. And if you don't, then make way for the consequences. Make way for the attacks on social media. Make way for the attacks against perhaps your position as a school teacher who doesn't want to play along with the lie. Make way for the attacks by the leftists in the media and the pundits who say that it's discriminatory to declare that a male is truly a male and a female is truly a female, and the two shall never interchange at will. This is where we're at in America, and it's the girls, the women, the females in society who suffer most. But Democrats continue to say that they're the ones that have women's backs. They're the ones who support women the most, and that these mean old Republicans just want to keep women pregnant, barefoot, in the kitchen, cooking for their man. It's utterly ridiculous, and honestly, I'm baffled sometimes by women who actually vote Democrat today. Now, I understand that there are some women out there who are so pro-abortion that that's the only issue they care about. The only issue they care about in the whole wide world is their ability to have sex at will, at whim, without consequences, that abortion is just yet another form of birth control that they can use. And so they're going to only vote on that issue. I understand that there are women like that in society, but by and large, most aren't. So it baffles me that women vote Democrat when it's the Democrat Party that is the one tearing down basic family values and bringing about a chaotic state of being so that the next generation, meaning children, will suffer psychological harm, perhaps even physical harm. It's the Democrats who groom children. It's the Democrats that have a president that can't stop sniffing little girls' hair, for crying out loud, and leering weirdly and uncomfortably at little kids, at little girls. This is all the Democrat Party. This is all brought to you courtesy of the Democrats. And yet, as I said, Democrats say that they're the party for women. I say it's time for women to start looking at what the Democrat Party actually puts forth by way of platforms and agendas and legislative goals. Because if you pick apart what the Democrats actually stand for when it comes time for women's issues, so-called women's issues, you'll see that there's nothing there that actually favor women, that actually help women. And you know what? I say this as a woman, but I say this as a woman who is puzzled by women who actually vote Democrat. And my next guest today, my guest is Jennifer Kerns. She is a top-ranked media pundit. She has her own podcast. She's a best-selling author. You've seen her everywhere on Newsmax and Fox, and she has a long and illustrious career in media and politics. And she's written this very important book called The Real War on Women. And she's here today to discuss. So, Jen, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm intrigued by the title of your new book, The Real War on Women, and then the subtitle, Time's Up for Radical Feminism and the Democrats' Liberal, Progressive, Socialist Agenda, because I agree with you. I think time is up, but is the left going to feel the same?
Well, look, I wrote this book because of what was happening in the midterms, right? The Roe versus Wade decision came out. It was overturned. The Dobbs decision came out. And Democrats were really successful at making women believe that they should care about one issue and one issue only, and that was abortion. And as I started to think about my female friends and my female colleagues, I thought, no, women care about so much more than just this one issue, this one bodily issue. And I really started to look at which party had treated women poorly. And I've always heard this phrase, the war on women. And I think the first time I heard the phrase was back in 2013 when I was doing a focus group in the battleground state of Colorado. And I thought, wow, war on women? Who's waging this war on women? And as I started to research it, over the years, I found that, it was actually the Democrat Party, not the Republican old white male party that was really perpetrating this war on women. And it really accelerated during the 2020 lockdown, during the, riots and the defunding of police, and really during the entire, COVID pandemic. And I know you've written a lot about this, and have a great interest in this. And so I looked at the results of numerous Democrat policies, actually 14 of the Democrat policies in this book, and I found that each and every one of them really harmed women in ways that were irrefutable, backed up by statistics, and really were quite extensive in the way that they hurt women.
I have a hard time understanding why women vote Democrat anyhow, aside from maybe some Democrat women feel they want to continue their entitlement lifestyle, and they think Democrats are the ones who will get them there in terms of taxpayer doleouts. But by and large, women who vote Democrat puzzle me. And I know there's been a trend for white women to go Republican, but why isn't that moving into a faster trend?
Well, I think we have to understand really how the voting demographic has changed. And boy, I could talk for a week on this, but I'll condense it into a few minutes. You look at the state of California, for example. 8-9 years ago, I was representing, taxpayer associations and Republican Party and all of these people. The messages we were crafting were, support the hardworking family, and that family of four is going to the gas pump and can't afford it, and your groceries as a family as you sit down to this Thanksgiving is so-and-so. Well, the demographics have changed, and it's changed not just in California, but it's changed across the country. But California, for example, did you know that the single career-minded professional female is now the number one voting bloc in the state of California? And so when you're looking at, as you said, maybe they're looking for a dole-out, I would maybe say it as they're looking for support. They don't have a head of the household. They are the head of the household. They don't have a husband to fall back on if they lose their jobs. And I think what's happening is women then start looking to government to fulfill that role of the head of the household. And so instead of husband Sam, they have Uncle Sam to fulfill that need. And I think that, by the way, is goes against the grain of feminism to begin with, right? Feminism is about being independent and being able to survive on your own and being able to have your own career. And that's not what the Democrats are actually serving up to women today. They're serving up a lifestyle, a lifelong dependency on the government. And that's not good, because the government under Democrats is not giving women what they initially desired. And so you look at the lockdowns, for example, in 2020 and 2021, more than 2 million women left the workforce. And it was the largest exodus of women from the workforce in American history and since the feminist movement began. And so here's this movement on the left that has always encouraged women to be, in the workplace, and always encouraged women to be career-minded. They couldn't have been further from that in the lockdowns in 2020 and 2021. Part of the reason was another policy that the Democrats placed upon women, and that was they kept their kids out of school. And so there were two key moments when women dropped out of the workforce in record numbers. One was in September of 2020, when they looked around and they said, boy, in LA Unified School District and in New York City and in all these places that are run specifically by liberals, schools weren't opening. And so they looked at their caregivers or their husbands or whomever fills that role for them, and they said, well, I have to, leave my job. I have to make that decision. Democrats are the ones that made them make that decision. And it happened again in January of 2021, the same month that Joe Biden was inaugurated. Women thought, oh, good, this will be, everyone will get back to life. Joe Biden promised he was going to solve this. Well, guess what? The first thing he did, he said, we're going to have my first 100 days. We're going to take a total pause. And those schools that were closed, you can stay closed. Those that are masking, you can stay masked. And another 1 million women, Cheryl, dropped out of the workforce. And that's on the Democrats' watch. And that happened in Democrat cities like Los Angeles and New York City. And it reshaped the American workforce in a way that I don't think we've really seen the effects of yet.
There's a lot of info there that we could talk about, but I wanted to go back to what you said about the changing demographics and the heads of household. more women are becoming heads of household in certain areas, at least, of the nation. Do you think you can take that fact and make the logical leap then to say that if Republicans as a party wanted to win more women voters, then they should go after the culture in terms of upholding traditional family values, which would, at least to some degree, bring back the head of household as the male figure? Can you make that statement, do you think?
Oh, I think that is a brilliant statement, but I think it's a longer-term statement. I think that has to happen over the next 7 to 8 years. I think that doesn't happen overnight. But there's no doubt that that is the answer, because when women are in more of a nuclear family environment, they will feel more secure and they will be less apt to look toward the government for that assistance. But I think in the near term, in the next 1 to 2 years, between now and 2024, and between now and 7, 8 years from now, we have to have a solution that I think exists in the RNC and others, understanding that changing demographic, because I still hear Republican messengers who have the greatest intentions, by the way, and they're great communicators, but I think we're missing that piece of the demographic. We're still, as Republicans, as a party, talking to people, and we're making women feel badly, and that is part of the culture. But look, I think this could easily be solved in the same way that the RNC brilliantly installed these Hispanic community centers. I think we need to be looking at a new component of Republican messaging, which is to the single, career-minded woman that doesn't feel like they're connecting with us, and that could be solved with some neighborhood events, wine night, book club night, all the things that we've got to meet women where they are and talk to them in that space in the same way that we did the Hispanic community centers, and look at how successful that was. It gave us Myra Flores. It gave us another female Latina in Texas. So these shifts in messaging, we don't have to change what our message is. We just have to change a little bit of how it's delivered. And, we really need to get through to women, and we need to be in those spaces so we can tell them the great news that we do have, which is that conservatives are more beneficial to their lives on these 14 areas that I talk about in the book, including, by the way, their own personal safety. Democrats want to talk about how Dobbs overturned your, personal safety, and talk about safety. Look at what's happened since 2020 and the riots in the summer of 2020. Women, and minority women in particular, fared the poorest. Even you look at cities like Minneapolis, the flagship city where the defunding of police was supposed to, turn things around and make people feel better and show that we cared about people. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Did you know in Minneapolis, in the immediate 1 year following the George Floyd incident and the talk of defunding the police, which they said was going to solve the problem, in the ward that George Floyd was from, sexual assault and violent attacks on women actually rose nearly 100%. And
Jeez.
That, I think, is a failed promise of the Democratic Party, and we don't talk about that at all. I've never heard anyone say that anywhere. We need to talk about that. And in the second highest minority ward in Minneapolis, the same thing happened. And you actually had parents in Minneapolis now saying, hey, we are worse off now than we were on the day of the George Floyd incident, and it's all due to the Democrats' change in policies. And so we need to meet women where they're at and the demographic where they're at. And we need to tell them why, as single women who have no one, if they feel like they have no one to rely upon and have a backstop, the Republican Party is actually the party you want to lean on, because we're the ones looking out for your personal safety and for your pocketbook and all of those other issues I talk about.
I agree about your statement that we need to meet women where they're at and get clear on the messaging to target them. but this has been a little bit of a point of annoyance to me over the years when they talk about women's issues versus other political issues. Because to me, as a woman, foreign policy is something that I care about, and that's not usually grouped in with women issues. Definitely the economy. Women aren't all about abortion and parental rights and schools and so forth. So maybe that's a political strategy, though, and you would know better than I about that. Is it a political strategy that we should keep going forward with the messaging of women's issues versus just political issues? Or should that just be stayed behind the scenes when the experts talk about women's issues, but when the message goes to the public, to women's groups and so forth, it's just political issues? Does that question make sense?
It does. It does, and I think you're hitting on an important nuance there that we don't need to say, sound the trumpet. Here we are. Here's our woman's message.
Yeah. I don't like the division.
Then people feel pandered to, right? And I think that's what maybe Republican Party has been doing to the Black American voting bloc for the last 30 years, is maybe talking in a way that seems a little pandering, a little mansplaining, if you know what I mean. And so I think we need to just be natural about this. And you know what? It can be as natural as having a coffee with somebody and talking to them about an issue that impacts their life. And I agree with you on foreign affairs. I have a chapter in the book that's called Foreign Relations Are an Abusive Relationship for Women and Girls Around the World. And I go through each of the Democrat administrations who have left women around the world in not just worse circumstances than they were when we found them, but in dire circumstances. Look at the Arab Spring. That happened at the hands of, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They said this was going to be a great thing. And if you look country by country, in Egypt, the heart of where this began in Tahrir Square, you had women being sexually assaulted. There was a 600% increase in sexual assaults overnight, starting in the Arab Spring in Tahrir Square and the 1 mile radius around it. Now that is truly a war on women. You want to talk about, that you can't get an abortion in, Mississippi, so you may have to go to California. That's not a war on women. Leaving women behind to get raped and pillaged and abused and to live a life of certitude as child brides in some of the countries that we left them in, that is the real war on women. And I think, look, there doesn't need to be anything preachy about that, how we talk to women about that. It could be as simple as saying, have you seen how terribly women are faring 10 years after the Arab Spring? I heard the other day that XYZ. And really, the reason I wrote the book was to give really normal people talking points, right? Because you're a writer for a living, and you're writing in one of the most prolific newspapers, and you're in the nation's capital, and you're used to this. I am used to being a press secretary, so I'm used to talking about this. The reason I wrote the book, The Real War on Women, was really to equip my friends around the country who were calling me and saying, hey, I'm trying to talk about issues in the carpool drop-off line, and I'm getting killed by these liberal, mean girl moms standing around sipping out of their Yeti tumblers and telling me that Donald Trump is a clown and no, the Democrat policies are better. And they're like, we just need some statistics out here. So that's why I wrote my book, was to give women a handbook so they could start talking to other women about the issues in a way that's not policy wonk and not in the way that you and I might talk about things at a coffee, but to give women the tools to start talking to their peers about why these complex policy matters actually don't benefit women on the Democrat side.
That's a great reason to write this book, The Real War on Women. And, I haven't had time to fully read it. I just got my own copy, but I love what I'm reading so far. And I hope everybody picks up a copy. And just to wrap with this last question, Jen, what do you see in terms of the future now? Do you see women being so upset by the dismal Joe Biden administration that there's going to be a swell of women voting Republican in the next election?
No, I don't.
I know. Me either.
Because I think if they had been feeling that way, we would have seen the red wave really happen. And I do think that we had many Republican victories at the ballot box, more so than the media wanted us to think in the first 72 hours. Look at the seats we picked up in the state of California. I was talking to the California GOP chairwoman, Jessica Milan Patterson, the other day about how she was able to do that. Look at the seats we picked up in New York and so forth. And I think the leadership class and the congressional class that's going to be sworn in January is going to be phenomenal. I mean, these are people who really, in the true spirit of our founding fathers, they went and did other things in life. They ran businesses, they had families, and then they chose to serve, or maybe they're concurrently serving with those things. And I think that class is going to be great. And I think the individual stories out of those class are going to be beacons to women who might say, the Republican Party is actually not, anti-this, anti-that. But no, I don't know that that's going to happen naturally. And I think that's why the book is important. I think the conversation we're having is important. Look, I think if women understood the draconian results, the devastating results of these 14 areas of Democrat policies, they would vote differently the next time around. That's why I wanted to get the book out. I had lots of people say, wait till 2023 or wait till the presidential election to release it. I said, no, we can't wait. This is happening now. We need to start talking and getting through to women now that they should be concerned about more than just one issue. By the way, speaking of, foreign affairs, I know we have to go, but I look at some of these countries, not just Egypt, but look at Libya, which, Hillary Clinton told us was going to be the greatest beacon. It was going to be democracy, 3.0. Women in Libya are faring worse than they were faring 200 years ago. And that is thanks to Democrat policies. And it's interesting. There have been some think tanks that have done, hey, 10 years after the Arab Spring, where is everybody now? Women in Syria would rather die than live the next 20 years under, indentured servitude as a child bride. And that's their best hope of, getting out of the system is for a 6-year-old to marry a 46-year-old. And we really need to talk about things like that and talk about how all of these Democrat policies, by the way, they're not just affecting women, they're going to affect our daughters and the next generation of girls. And that's why it's important to get in there, have these conversations, and stop the march of these awful, awful Democrat policies around the world. And lastly, I'll just say this. Another reason I wrote the book, if you look at the actual percentage of suburban women who have a need to find an abortion, it's actually relatively slim. And going back to the culture note you started with, look at how the Democrats have succeeded. They have Plan B behind every over-the-counter, countertop, from Walgreens to Duane Reade to CVS. They have birth control readily available. And in some middle schools, by the way, where you don't even have to ask your parent for it. And the list goes on and on. So the idea that women somehow have this rash of pregnancies happening and they're going to need to run to the nearest abortion provider, that is a demonic lie that the left has been selling American women for 30-plus years now. And it needs to stop. We need to have conversations about all of these other policy issues which actually impact women's day-to-day lives more.
Absolutely. Starting with a good read of your book, The Real War on Women. And then just briefly to add to what you said about the horrible studies from Libya now, just wait until the reports start coming out on Afghanistan. Another Democrat legacy, right? Attacks on women there have escalated. We don't even know the numbers yet on that. So you hit on a very crucial topic, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on Bold and Blonde. The book is The Real War on Women, Time's Up for Radical Feminism and the Democrats' Liberal, Progressive, Socialist Agenda. Jen Kerns, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I like the reason Jen gave for writing this book. It was basically to give her own friends, her own community of people, the bullet points they need to fight the rabid, anti-America far left. Because look, how many of us haven't been confronted or put in awkward situations by angry, over-the-top angry leftists? And you're left a little bit speechless because you're thinking, wow, this person is a loon. Wouldn't it be great to have some sort of snappy response based in fact that can shut these people down? And look, 14 points of the real war on women to cut through the clutter that the left creates, to convolute issues so they can advocate for more government, more government, more government. It just seems a great holiday gift, right? Merry Christmas season. Yes, we say Merry Christmas on Bold and Blunt, but also Happy Hanukkah. And you know what? Happy holiday season. Really, I don't see any point in getting in big verbal battles over Christmas versus holiday season because they both apply. But for me, it's all about Christ. Merry Christmas. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can also get Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com or wherever podcasts are offered, such as Apple and Spotify. I recommend Spotify because Apple is busily shutting down free speech. Just ask Elon Musk. Anyhow, tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.